Welcome to Sunshine Art and Drawing. Today I'm doing a review of the Faber Castell 12 set of watercolours. They come in a box like this and I'm just opening this for the first time. And inside, it's a little hard to get out, is a plastic hard case. It's quite sturdy, about the sturdiness of a CD case, and on the inside you get a palette with 5 wells and your 12 colours and also a brush. The brush isn't great. I kind of gave a little review there on the screen, but it is a cheap brush, so probably use your own brushes with this one. And I'm just going to test all of the colours. I'm doing them in a bit of a random order. I did the lighter, sort of warmer colours towards the top, and then the cooler colours towards the bottom. And for each swatch, I did a gradient swatch of just swiping downwards in a zigzag motion until the pigment sort of run out, and then a watery swatch of colour just to see if the pigment breaks up at all or shows any little bits and pieces as it dries. As a first impression, these are quite nice paints. Quite a simple set, like you don't get a good array of colours, but plenty enough for painting just about anything I can think of. And the fact that you get sort of like pretty much 2 of each colour, 2 browns, 2 reds, 2 greens, 2 blues, and so on and so forth, makes it a lot easier. I'm just doing a darker swatch at the bottom. I'm going to test the white on that once it dries. And I did a bit of a darker pigment swatch of each colour just so you can see what the colours actually look like. And as I'm doing that, I'm just checking to see as they dry to see if the black patch is dried at the bottom. And the white, it's not a titanium white or a Chinese white, I think it used to be called. It's definitely not anything like that. It's much more of a pastel color to mix with. And here I'm just going to try and test for like paint flow and graininess on wet, just to see, because some paints work really well dry, like the paints are wet but the paper's dry. But when you have the paper wet, then they just break up or they go really faint. So I really wanted to test that. These stay really bright. They do spread out, but that's pretty normal for watercolors. But they're pretty controllable, like you can put the water where you want and it'll stay. And here I'm just going to do a swatch of the black down the side because I didn't really do a watery swatch of the black. And there's more of a line. Sometimes it's fun to do like calligraphy or ink work with black, and it's good to see if the black will flow nicely and not break up. And it does a good job. These paints are quite good. For the price, they're pretty amazing. And here I'm just going to be doing a little sort of nature landscape scene. And I'm not using watercolor paper. I know you're supposed to use watercolor paper, but this is from my scrapbook. It's got pretty thick paper, so it can handle it. And I don't mind if the paper buckles because it's just a scrapbook. And here I'm just going to put in some darker blue and some of the lighter blue and mix those together to make a bit of a wash for the sky. Washes don't always have to be one colour. You can mix 2 colours together. It's just really important not to overwork the paint. So you do want to sort of stop at some point. I had to overwork the paint a little in the middle because that hair was in the way, but I got him off in the end. And here I'm just going to add, just with the smaller brush, just a little touch. That was probably a little too much blue, but it'll work out. And just little touches here and there of the darker colours and more pigment, and at the top as well. And the very last step I did was I took some pink and I very lightly added a little bit of pink. This is one of the parts where they talk about overworking your painting. If I was to just go in there and go back and add more and go back and add more, I'd end up with this artificial pink sunset, which is not really what I'm trying to paint. So you've got to be really sparing with, if you're going to use a contrasting colour in a sky, like orange or like pink, just very sparingly. And here I'm just going to do the field and the grass. I sped this part up because it took a little while to do. I think I spent about 30 minutes on it. And as I'm adding some more water here, you can see on the edge there the paint's, like the paper's too wet and the paint's running. So I tried my little trick of you move all the paint to the edge of the paper as best you can, and then you squeeze out the brush and then run it along the edge, and the brush will absorb that paint, so you end up with a nice sort of crisp, I guess, edge. It's not perfect, but it fixed the job. And I'm doing the rest of the sky and leaving a little space because I'm going to do some mountains up there on the horizon. And first some little trees. I wanted to do the trees first because I was worried if I did the mountains behind the trees that the trees would take up the black of the mountains and look weird. I wanted them to be bright green with a little brown at the bottom. So that way I can stop at the tree line and you don't end up with any black in the green of the trees. And then a little bush along the bottom here. I don't know, it just looked like that's where a bush belonged. And this is the little path I want to do at the front. It kind of wraps around the back of these trees. So I'm going to paint these trees first, just to get where I want them, and all the leaves. This particular picture, I kind of used inspiration from a sort of a hike or a bushwalk that I do pretty regularly to it's a place called Seafood Meadows, and there's a recreational park there, like a big open bush park. And you can walk around, there's paths all through, and it's all open and it's to the public, so it's quite nice to take photographs and have a bit of a wander around. And that's what inspired me. A lot of the sort of paths are kind of either cobblestone or just gravel paths because they're not cement, because it's a bush park, I guess. And it just reminded me of that and how the paths are quite twisting. You know, you'll look out and it'll be like a field and then the path will twist around and you're under trees again, and it's really, really sort of a relaxing place. I'm just going to do a bit of a gradient with these little pebble stones, and if you're doing something that's a bit perspective, which is what I did with this path, it's supposed to get sort of thinner and smaller as it wraps around those trees. You just want to do each of the little pebbles a little smaller, and here I'm using the pink and I'm just going to do some little flowers along the edge of this path. Now the flowers that I'm trying to paint are tiny. If I was to try and paint like real flowers, you know, with the 5 petals and little centers and so on and so forth, it'd be far too detailed and they would look massive. They would look like the size of my hand in real life. So I'm just doing tiny little dots of pink pigment, and then I'm dotting them with a wet brush just to spread them out a little. And then they end up looking like little petals. That's quite an easy way to quickly do some flowers. And here I'm just going to do the dirt around the bottom of the flowers, or the soil that they're growing in. And this can be the tricky part. You probably just want to use the very tip of the brush and just touch the paper in the spaces. That way you're not going to run the ink into the other ink and sort of have a mess of green and pink. I think I did pretty well. I don't think I messed up too many of them. And if they blend out anyway, it'll just look like there's more flowers behind it. Once that's done, you can kind of tell that like there's a weird spot between my tree edge and the soil kind of looks the same, like as if that's all soil. So I will fix that in a minute. I'm just going to do that now. So I add some branches and some darker bits just to make it look like there's actually trees there, and a little sort of rocky edge around the path. And once I've done all of that and added a little bit of a highlight to the mountains, I let it dry for about half an hour. So pop your paints away. It's quite a handy little case, nice and small. And I grabbed a black coloured pencil because I didn't want a really harsh line. But when you paint with watercolours, sometimes it will become sort of unfocused and you'll lose the detail of your picture. So just adding a little bit of sort of darker colours or an outline can just bring that back to life. So this was my review of the Faber Castell 12 set of watercolours. I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a sunshiny day. Bye!